So thank you everybody for joining us for this MindCore talk today. It's probably understandable why we thought that this seems like it was a good idea. We're going to actually have a seminar talk at noon that's going to talk about sort of some of the financial decision making that's happening at universities. We've heard that there are not as many academic jobs. Also, it's hard to be a professor, and people are sort of making different choices for financial reasons or life reasons or just interest reasons. And so we wanted to have an opportunity for our trainees at Penn and elsewhere, since this is virtual, to learn sort of more about what's out there in the world and what the opportunities are. So universities aren't always great about talking about that. A little bit better about talking about all the amazing things that you can do if you study in these fields. And so my name is Heather Calvert. I'm the director for MindCore. I am not a scientist. And I will be sort of monitoring the chat. I think the best way this will work, we have one of our amazing postdoctoral fellows, MindCore fellows, Rista Plate, is going to moderate today. I will go off screen, but we will, if you have questions for our speakers, feel free to go ahead and just post them in the chat, and we'll just sort of see how it goes. We'll play it by ear. We had hoped that this would be an event on campus. Jesse, I see yes, you're back at Penn, but not. We will look for opportunities to really, truly bring you back to campus when it feels like it's alive. I'm in the office today, but there's me and like 2 other people in 2 buildings that I've seen so far. Rista, it looks like you're in. All right, I will be quiet and I'll turn it over to Rista.
Great, thanks, Heather. And thanks everyone for joining us today for our first panel on grants, policy, and influence. We have 3 wonderful panelists, and I will have them each just introduce themselves briefly in a moment, but just to introduce them a little bit first, we have Sachi Doshi, who's the Emerging Technologies Advisor at USAID, Jesse Isaacman Beck, who's the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at NIH, and Samantha White, who's in the Office of Neuroscience Communication and Engagement at NIH. So we'll start by having each panelist just very briefly say what they're doing in their current position, and then we'll go ahead and open it up for Q&A to make sure we can get all of your questions, or as many as possible, answered in the next hour. So will each of you please just tell us what you're doing in your current position, and also correct any mispronunciations I had, starting with Shachi.
You did great, Rista. It's Sachi, and yes, as you said, I'm at USAID, but actually I think all of us started in this journey after Penn with the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship that Jesse is currently doing. So when I finished my grad school career at Penn in 2017, I then did a short postdoc in the same lab where I was, which was Dr. Robert Kalb's lab. He's since moved to Northwestern, so he's not at Penn anymore. But then I started my AAAS fellowship in 2018. So I did that for 2 years at USAID, and then I stuck around because I loved what I did. And so currently I'm still serving in the same office as an Emerging Technologies Advisor, as you said. But what does that mean? Because we have all kinds of fun titles and names in government. So essentially what we do is so I sit on a team called the Strategy and Research Team within USAID. And for those who don't know, USAID is the US government's foreign assistance agency that focuses on international development, and essentially the mission of the agency is to alleviate poverty around the world. So we work entirely internationally and almost exclusively in developing countries. So there's like the poorer countries, we don't do any work really in richer, more developed countries. And so we have a wide range of programs to help do that. We are a grant-making agency primarily. And so we provide assistance through our partners to provide healthcare, education, economic support, so a wide range of things, climate change related work, yeah, I said education already. So whatever, like very wide ranging social benefits across various sectors. And so the office that I sit in is called the Technology Division. And my team, Strategy and Research, is kind of like an internal think tank within the agency. And what we focus on is the use of emerging technologies in assistance for any of these goals across all of these sectors and in any geography around the world. And so, for example, emerging technologies that we've worked on include things like digital ID, digital identification type technology.
I see a little freezing on my end. Is okay, everybody else is seeing it too. All right, we'll give Shachi just a moment to see if she unfreezes. Otherwise, we will maybe shift and come back to her. Okay, let's pivot and then come back to make sure that we have a chance to hear everyone, and hopefully the tech will resolve itself. Jesse, do you want to kind of pop in the meantime and talk a little bit about what you do in your current position, particularly since kind of everybody started in this policy fellow spot?
Absolutely, Risa. Thank you. So I'm Jesse Isaac, and back my pronouns are he, his, him. I am currently a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow. In name and in function, I am the special assistant to the director of the Office of Science Policy at the NIH. So I'll go into more detail on that, but I'll also follow in line with Sachi's great introductory and give a little bit of my academic background. So I was at Penn and in Sam's class. It's our class, Sam, but Sam's class. I worked with Mikhail Granado for my PhD, and in my postdoc, I went out to Stanford and worked with Tom Clandon. Really excited about and interested in neuroscience broadly, and especially molecular and cellular neuroscience. So that's my background academically. I really thought I was going to be a PI. I didn't know at what level. I love teaching. I love interacting with people. I love mentoring. Did a lot of extracurricular stuff related to that at Penn. Came from a undergraduate background at a small liberal arts school. Thought I might head in that direction. All of that got extremely. It got too much. It got to be too much. It was anxiety provoking. It just kept being like one set of hurdles to jump over, only to hop into another pool of anxiety. For me, this is me personally, I'm opening up about that. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And I had also spent a lot of time thinking about questions related to how we can help scientists do science better, how we can make scientists and trainees happier doing the science that they do, and how we can do all of those things more equitably. I'm very passionate about social justice. So then when I headed to the NIH as a AAAS fellow, I was fortunate to sort of get paired, and we all can talk more about that process if you're interested, but I got paired with Lyric Jorgensen, who is the director of the Office of Science Policy. And so what that means is many things, but one is that she manages an office of around 60 people that cover biomedical research and clinical healthcare policy at the highest level for the NIH. We cover things like clinical trials. We cover things like biosafety and biosecurity, which you all know has been in the news a lot lately and has been politicized. Talk about that. Things like data sharing and how can we be more open with the science and work that we're doing and collaborative about it. I love thinking about all those issues. I have a window into all of those issues in my position because functionally I track all of her emails. I make sure that I am her external brain and helping her to manage all these issues. So that's what I do in my function. There, I do have specific projects that I work on. I work on something called the Unite Initiative, which some of you may have heard of. This is NIH's massive effort to bring racial and ethnic equity to biomedical research. Happy to talk about my work related to that. And I also, to just circle back to Sachi's amazing work, I do work on emerging technology issues as well. I think a lot about data science, and I'm on a committee that is focused on what's going to happen with data science in biomedical research in the next 5 to 10 years, and what does this mean for people participating in clinical research and their safety, protection, et cetera, et cetera. Happy to talk about all of it, and thanks for the time.
Thanks so much, Jesse, and thanks for sharing a little bit about your path. And it sounds like you're working on lots of exciting projects. Hopefully we'll hear some more about those. Sachi, sorry we lost you. We'll let you pick back up where you left off and say any remaining things. We lost you when you were talking just about the digital ID work.
Got it. Okay. And so sorry, you guys. This is the world we live in, and I have glitchy internet now and then. And I also, should have mentioned, hi, Sam and Jesse. It's so good to see you. We all were in neuroscience together at Penn, and I haven't seen them in so long, even though we're all in DC. It's crazy. Okay, just wanted to say that. Okay, yes, digital ID is one of the things we do. The other one that's taken up a lot of our oxygen in the room is artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff. And so essentially, as we are trying to make our development aid work more efficient and fast and use government dollars well, we're turning to these data-driven technologies to help achieve those goals better, hopefully. But what our team really focuses on, sometimes we call ourselves the wet blanket team, because what we really focus on is like, how can all of this fall apart? And we are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in the world. They tend to be excluded anyway. And and a lot of them don't even have access to cell phones, let alone smartphones, are not really well represented in data sets around the world. And so we think about how can we use these emerging technologies as we're getting excited about using them, how can we use them responsibly? And so we do our own research to try to understand sort of socio-technical implications of these technologies, how they impact human rights, how they impact people's everyday lived experiences, and ensuring that as we take these on, we do them carefully, ensuring that there are guardrails in place, that we're bringing the right people at the table, we're hearing from them and accounting for any risks that could happen. So that's in a nutshell what we do. So we do our own research, we do trainings, we participate in internal and international events to sort of shape the discussion. We help to inform the policies that are happening within our agency, but also in the interagency and in international bodies to make sure that they're taking all of these kinds of things into account. So pretty sort of wide-ranging portfolio. And just, I guess it was great to hear Jesse's sort of spiel on like, where we started and where we're going career-wise. So I can just give a brief thing about that from my perspective. And yeah, I mean, when I started grad school, I also thought that I would be working in academia, but that started to shift like midway through grad school for me, as I, around the time where I'm sure all of us have this experience where a project is crashing and burning. I had to like start from scratch in year 4 entirely, right? Like just everything had to start over because my entire hypothesis was wrong. It was just like not working. And I was like, this is exhausting. And I don't know if I can keep doing this always. And I was also just at the same time, political winds were changing. And I was getting very, very concerned about the way that things were progressing outside of our little bubble in science. And I was paying a lot of attention to the news and like the types of things we do. I was getting interested in policy related stuff. I was also very engaged in extracurricular things within NGG. And so I realized how much I like talking with people and like engaging with people and doing things that are not just solitary in the lab. So that was like my personality that I felt like was not being used as well in science in a way that I found enjoyable. And then finding out about this policy fellowship, like Sam had done it before me. And so I had many chats with her and like other people that who were engaged in this world, and realizing that there are other ways to use our critical thinking skills. I do nothing related to neuroscience anymore, but just if you care about issues, there are ways in which you can use your scientific training and apply it in other ways. And so that was eye-opening for me. And I at least wanted to try it. I was like, if I don't try this, I'll regret it. And then let's just see what happens. I was like, it's 1 or 2 years, this fellowship. What's that compared to like 6 years of PhD, plus maybe how many years of postdoc, plus an entire career. So I'm like, at least I can try this and see what happens. So that's how I got into it. And I'm happy to chat more about any of that, but I should give the floor to Sam.
Thanks so much. That's great to hear a little bit of the background. And it sounds like, you know, you're working on so many different types of projects, which seems super cool. All right, I will pass it then to Samantha, or let us know if you prefer Sam.
Yeah, no, Samantha's just like a lot of syllables and letters, so Sam is fine. So whatever you want to call me, not Sammy, never Sammy, don't do that. That is, Jesse knows that is a point of rage that I have. But so I am going to actually be pretty quick. So, you know, I want to encourage you guys to kind of go to the MindCore website that I think is beautifully set up as someone who has shifted more and more into the science communications, right, and external engagement side of things. I have found it very useful. So kudos to the MindCore team for that. But I did give kind of the details of my background, and then actually Jesse and Sach helped cover most of the rest for me. So as they mentioned, you know, we were all in NGG together once upon a time. It wasn't, we were, I think, all disruptors a little bit, right? And so we were all in there doing things, shaking things up, really participating in a program that I'm so delighted to see has, you know, continued on since we left, but GLIA, the Graduate-Led Initiatives and Activities Committee, that is going to segue me into something that neither Jesse nor Sach commented on, although they both referenced it. In the government, we love acronyms, and we like it better when they can spell something. It is alphabet soup over here. So that was our first effort. Our colleague and friend, Kate Christensen-Legay, who was in the class with Jesse and I, is the one who really came up with that acronym, and that's fantastic, because sometimes acronyms now, like UNITE that Jesse referenced, is actually like sentences. It's more like an acrostic. So at any rate, I really, while I was at Penn, while I was really getting into the neuroscience, and I kind of am just going to build on a couple things that Jesse and Sach said, you know, there are other things that you're all doing, that we were all doing at the same time, right? And thinking about the aspects of science that, you know, I really enjoyed as a graduate student, and in my kind of extracurricular activities as a graduate student, those are things that I kind of, as I was looking ahead into my next steps of my career, I wanted to see integrated into my day-to-day activities. So with GLIA, you know, which I don't know, actually, Sam, yes, Sach. The idea was, again, kind of, how can we all work together to really talk about our science, to learn from each other so we can be better scientists, but also to talk to other people outside of our immediate circles and really do outreach about biomedical research, all of those kinds of different things. And so that is really something that has been what I've spent a lot of time trying to pursue at NIH. You know, I did do a stint with an advocacy organization where I was going to the Hill and also trying to do science outreach to them, and try to really think carefully about, you know, how do you translate what is complicated about science to different audiences so that it is useful for them, right? And it's something that they can pick up and they can use, and really starting to appreciate that, you know, it's not just the scientists versus the public. There's all sorts of flavors of scientists and professionals. There's all sorts of flavors of publics, right? And so that's also something that, you know, I have continued to really dig into while I've been at NINDS, really thinking about, am I talking to nonprofit organizations? Are they patient groups? Are they patient advocacy organizations? What type of patient advocacy organization is it? Are we talking about a disorder that has treatments, that is maybe something people can recover from? Or are we talking about a disorder that has really struggled to see advancement? Right now, there was recently the Act for ALS that President Biden just signed, that was passed. And ALS is a really tragic disease that we have been working in the biomedical community on for decades. And really, the act is to bring us all together, right? And have us all work together across sectors, across areas of the government, so that we can try to make some really substantial progress, I should say. So everything that I do and everything that was kind of referenced has always circulated around that. It's about bringing all the different perspectives together, so that we can really try to understand each other, understand the problem that we're talking about, and really get to a point where we can take action, we can do something. I think, in the government, I will also say, when you're talking about, our topics, right? Grants and policy and influence and whatnot, there are games to be played, right? There is a language to use, and there are processes that exist, and there is in fact bureaucracy. And even if all of you going forward don't come into the government like we all bounced, that's fine, because it's important for our extramural, so our outside scientific research community and professional communities to appreciate how the government operates when it comes to grants and policy, and how you can make the most influence on those two areas, right? And so really keeping yourselves educated, even if you stay in lab, on how you can share your science, talking to communications offices like the one that I work in, how you can really understand how the policies that Jesse works on at the very highest level at NIH are formed, and when are there opportunities for you to weigh in and say, hey, this is my perspective of the state of the field right now. I really want to share that with you. There's something that we have at NIH and across the government that's called a request for information, or an RFI. So there are lots of different ways for you to plug in there. And I think that, I like to spend most of my time doing that. I don't want to only be down the rabbit hole. I studied addiction. Yeah, crack is whack, don't do drugs. But I want to really be able to kind of hear what all of you are doing, and hear what my colleagues are doing, and work across the agencies. I don't get to work with USAID that often, but they're awesome. They do really good work. So with that, I will stop and I guess open back the floor.
Great, thanks so much. I think that's such a great motivator to keep that kind of broader perspective, and so important for all of us in any area. So we're open now for questions. Please post them in the chat. I can get us rolling with a few things. And one is, it's related to what Sam's been talking about, which is, a lot of times there's this talk of pivoting to careers outside of academia. So could you each talk about, how big was that transition for you? Did you feel like your skills from graduate school transferred pretty easily, or you really needed to go through more of a learning curve to figure out, the jargon and the process for both getting these jobs and being successful in those jobs? So why don't we start, maybe Jesse, do you want to start on that, or anyone else who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and I'd love to hear what Sam and Sach have to say on this too. Yeah, so I think what was extremely helpful for me was all of the so-called extracurricular activities that I participated in as a part of NGG. We mentioned CLIA, variety of other things that we could talk about, but all of those helped me to gain perspective on the myriad ways that we can think about using the expertise that we have, right? You are all learning how to communicate, hopefully, your science. And I, like Sam and Sach, really enjoyed that aspect. I'm an extrovert. I love interacting with people. So that skill was immediately clear. What I will say is, in your shoes, I was totally anxious about this. I did not feel that I knew what was required in anything other than the track up through being a PI. That I felt like I knew that, really well, and was all gamed up to do it. Otherwise, I was like, oh, I know I have skills, but I really don't know what these other people do and how I would apply those skills. In 6 weeks or less at my job, it was immediately clear that my ability to interact with people, connect with them, establish relationships was super key to anything. My ability to learn and learn quickly was valued. My ability to this is not a humble brag. I'm just trying to explain. Okay, it is a humble brag. My ability to think about projects on various timescales was critical. We have a lot of deadlines in my office, and I know how to get a thing done in a week and plan for it and do it all independently. I also know how to schedule or think about planning something that's 6 years long. And both of those are really valued skills. And I don't think, well, I want to say this positively. I think they are skills you learn very concretely in your PhD. And so it does transfer. You may not feel like it's going to. My advice is talk to as many people who are doing stuff about what they do, and ask them this exact question: how do those skills apply to what you do, or how do your PhD skills apply to what you do? And then you will be able to translate when and if you are looking for those other things. I'll stop there.
I think that's a really encouraging view for people who are thinking about these pathways. Samantha or Sachi, do you have anything to add?
I'll go because I actually am going to be, I think, faster, and then Sach can speak a little bit more. So, right. To be perfectly honest, and I think this is well known at this point for people who at least are more in the neuroscience side of things at BGS, I basically finished my prelim and then was like, oh God, what have I done? And so I was never I did not do a postdoc. I did go on a couple postdoc interviews, more just for the experience and to learn about that and to participate, but really this was not hard for me. There was no doubt. I was like, what I don't want to do is be an academic researcher. So I was more of a, okay, well, thinking about, again, kind of Jesse touched on this, I had mentioned it before, what was I spending my time on when I wasn't in the lab, and what were the parts of lab work, not that there were tons for me, but that I liked, right? And so then that kind of had me looking elsewhere. Kind of to Sacha's point with the AAAS fellowship and fellowships, internships, I mean, y'all are gonna have degrees, so hopefully paid, that's a thing. It's worth exploring. It's a year, maybe it's 2 years, and having just done a PhD, what is that? That's nothing, right? And so I think that the biggest hurdle, no matter where you're going, is just believing in the work you've already put in, right? And appreciating that it's useful across all sectors, honestly, and there are different people too, whether they're in academia still, or whether they go into industry, or whether they're in government like the three of us, or whatever, who came from where you are. And if you have a question, and if you're struggling to convince yourself and figure out, well, how do I translate this? Ask us, ask them, right? We've done it, and so it's not a question, like you don't have to reinvent this wheel, actually. And so I think, in my case, I just was so convinced I was never going to stay in science. I think someone asked, do you miss lab work? Nope. No, I do not. So, but that's just me, right? And honestly, there are so many people doing great lab work. Why? Just because I can, I shouldn't hold a spot, right? So.
I'll just, I agree with everything Sam and Jesse have said, so I won't repeat, but I think I'll compliment by saying, I think my experience was a little bit different because I ended up going pretty far from biomedical science altogether, let alone neuroscience. Like I'm at USAID and I work on a topic I knew nothing about when I started. So I had to learn it. Like I didn't really know what AI was. Like I don't know how to code. I have not coded a single line of code in my life. And I work on digital technology, emerging technologies, telling data scientists what they should be doing when I have never coded, right? So the imposter syndrome exists. Like you can definitely feel like, why am I in this? Like I started my fellowship, I matched with this office, and I really was just like, these guys are doing cool work. I should try it. Check it out. Like that was it, right? And I was like, they matched with me. That's how the AAAS process works. It's like you rank the ones you liked, they rank the interviewees that they liked, and then AAAS does some magic and you just get a match. And I was like, what? I did not expect it. I really thought I was going to end up at NIH, which was also on my list because that's where my skills align the most. And I had just kind of like added these guys to my rank list at USA, and I ended up matching. And I was like, let's do it. It'll be fun. But then I started the fellowship, and in my second week was asked to participate in a roundtable discussion as the only person from USAID to represent our point of view on like responsible use of artificial intelligence in development. And there were people from all these other organizations and like the World Bank and like all these people. And I was like, why are you sending me? I know nothing about this. And there is a little bit of like learning on the job that happens. The PhD had not taught me any concrete skills to be able to participate in that roundtable discussion. But like Sam and Jesse said, we had done all these extracurricular type things. We had learned to talk to people. We had engaged with people outside of Penn. We had invited external speakers. We know how to read up on things really quickly. Like I spent a week just like reading everything I possibly could. You know, it was like trying to get ready for a prelim, but like doing it in a week. But also the stakes are just not that high, right? Like you're just participating in a conversation and you have a point of view to share. Nothing will break if you don't do it like perfectly. And I really appreciate my mentor's faith in me and wanting me to just sort of represent that. And you'll find that that's all over the government too. Like they want you to build your skills as you are working here. And they're not hiring you because you know so much about like the subject matter necessarily, but because you've demonstrated that you can be a quick learner, that you care about the thing that you're going to do. Obviously, all of us care, like the three of us care about public service. That's why we're here, you know, or we could have gone other ways in our career. And so that's sort of that passion and that dedication is important. And I think we learn that in our PhD too, right? Just dedication and passion about like a very small thing that like nobody else might care about. So these are soft, like the soft skills that I didn't think about when I was doing my PhD were going to be important, but I do reflect on them on a daily basis. So, and then don't get me wrong, I still have imposter syndrome sometimes. So it doesn't like always go away, but I'm still learning. And I still find sometimes I'm like, wow, okay, I was used to thinking in different time scales, as Jesse was saying. Sometimes things move very quickly in the government. You have to get used to doing meetings, a lot of meetings, talking a lot, writing a lot, reading a lot, and doing it all in the same day. Sometimes you get a memo like 10 minutes before a meeting is going to start, and you need to absorb it, develop your talking points, and be ready to talk within those 10 minutes, right? So those kinds of things we are good at doing, but we get really good at doing really fast when you're in the government. So sorry, I'm kind of meandering all over the place, but that's my general answer. And yes, I do miss lab. I do. I'm not like Sam. I miss doing things with my hands, I think. It's a lot of sitting in front of a computer and typing right now, especially right now. And I miss being like on my feet and doing things with my hands because I was like a molecular biology person. So it was a lot of pipetting and stuff. That's what I miss the most. I'll stop.
Thank all three of you for those great answers. And there's a lot of questions being answered in the chat too, in terms of what the fellowship looks like specifically. And it looks like there are just many options that can look different ways. I will just ping this question that's come up twice in a couple of different ways, which are there options to live outside of DC and Maryland if you're interested in policy work? So maybe are you three living in the DC area, or if you are, do you know others who are doing similar work outside, or is there more flexibility work from home right now that might help people who are thinking about geographic constraints?
Right, yeah, so we were just talking about this at an all hands meeting for NINDS this morning, actually a little bit, this concept of kind of remote work and how the pandemic has changed the government's perspective on telework and remote work. So, you know, in terms of policy, funding research. So like there are the federal, there's the federal grant system, but then there's also non-government organizations, foundations, all sorts of things that fund research. So it can happen on a smaller scale, on a more targeted level, however you kind of want to think about that. And those are all over the place. I think too, there is a lot of opportunity to do what we're doing on the state level. California actually has its own really well-established science technology policy fellowship program. So other states have these kinds of opportunities too. I think the other piece, I mean, I actually am from Silver Spring, Maryland originally. So I'm like one of the few people in the DMV area who it's like true local kind of, but I live in Bethesda, I live near NIH because I knew I was gonna hang out, right, and stay here. The government has been learning from the pandemic and is pivoting a little bit in terms of how we approach work and the expectations for people to definitely be on site. It does always really just depend on the work that you're doing and the job that you have and the responsibilities and your ability to carry out those kind of tasks in addition to the climate. But then I think the other thing to just also keep in mind with the government and stuff and how we make decisions is it's also like we're not all like on the same page, shocker. So, you know, I mean, HHS is the department above NIH, which is one of the agencies under HHS, right? So in these kinds of decision-making processes, it's happening like all up and down a spectrum. So right now there's not really a clear answer actually, because everyone is trying to evolve with what we've learned over the past couple of years. So that's not going to be very satisfying to all of you, but you know, I will say I'm very extroverted like Jesse. So I have been trapped in my living room and it is slowly killing me inside. So I have had 100% telework, but I hate every second of it. So yes. So that's, I think the other thing, and related to that, most careers in policy grants, that's kind of a similar question. There are tons here, certainly. There are also kind of a lot of different organizations that are non-government have offices and whatnot in this area because they're trying to talk to the government and kind of to the point of one of the topics of the session, influence, right? Have the government influence them more directly and have influence on the government. So there's tons here, but no, they're really all over the place. And it really becomes more about, you know, you getting a sense of the skill sets that you have, the skill sets you want to develop, the kinds of networks you want to expand, and then get an understanding about, you know, right, where physically are you comfortable being? How much money do you need to survive, right? And then that'll start helping you narrow in.
I'm going to ask two follow-up questions for you or the other two panelists, which are, one is, any practical advice for finding these opportunities? I think that's something that we get very little exposure to in academia. You know, what website should we even go to look at different careers, if that's something you're interested in? And then the second follow-up question being about salary. You know, what are the expected kind of entry-level salaries in these types of positions? And then how does that kind of, what does promotion look like, and what does the salary range going up look like? And if it's not too overwhelming, I'll add kind of the third question that came up in the chat, which was about considering nonprofit or grassroots organizations, which might kind of intersect with that salary question as well, if you have any knowledge about that.
I can start, and you guys can follow me. When I was looking, honestly, was very laser focused on the AAAS fellowship. And so I didn't do a whole lot of research outside of that. I had applied, I think, so because I didn't care that much about being as connected to neuroscience, I was looking pretty widely, and I was looking at a lot of foundation websites. Like there's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the World Wildlife Fund, like just organizations I had heard of, and I would just like keep checking their websites. And I think I put 1 or 2 applications in, but they were kind of half-ass efforts. Like I had really focused mostly on the AAAS fellowship. And actually, because I was doing that while I was still in my PhD, when I knew I was like serious about applying, I actually scheduled my defense to make sure that I was eligible to apply. So I worked with my PI to make sure that like my defense was done, and I was, because I think you do have to have a PhD to apply. There are very few people who are masters and can do it that I've come across, and I don't know what their circumstances are, but like I think 99% of people who do the AAAS fellowship are PhDs. I think that was a question in the chat, so I just want to make sure I answer that. And so, and you have to have your degree in hand before you can apply. So you do have to, if you're going to do it right after grad school, like you need to think about what to do for that year. And so I had negotiated just like finishing up my papers that I was still working on in that interim period, but still defending before with my PI. So I didn't consider the other ones as much. But to the original question about, sorry, what was the original question? I forgot. I'm like on a totally different tangent right now.
Well, there were 3, so it's a little bit hard to keep track.
Yes.
Places to find jobs, which you
Yes.
gave a lot of great examples, and then salaries and salary ranges,
Yes.
and nonprofits, which it sounds like, yeah.
Right. So one more thing on places to find jobs is from the USAID perspective, if you care about this kind of work, USAID is a granting agency as well. And we work with, we don't have enough staff to do work in 80 countries around the world. So we have a lot of implementing partners that work. And if you're interested in international work, you can go to workwithusaid.com and that you can see the partners we work with very often. They are based in DC, they're based all over the country, and they're also based internationally. And so if you want to do like an implementing role to implement a USAID project, you could work for one of those implementing organizations. So that's another place to look for jobs if you don't want to go through the fellowship. Just from what I know from USAID. Salaries. If you start at AAAS, and if you come, they have, it's very clearly laid out. Like it's like if you have X number of experience, number of years of experience after your PhD. If you're within like the first 5 years, you get X salary. If you're beyond that, you get a little bit higher, blah, blah, blah. But everybody starts, if you are right out, most people are within that first bracket soon after PhD. And they would get, I think it's like a GS 12 step 1 level. So there's a pretty organized scale in which government people get paid. So that's where you start. And then when you get hired on, if you want to stay and you get hired on, you negotiate. It depends on the position. So everything in government is like very well like organized. There's not that much negotiation, but you can do a little bit. You apply to a position, you have to apply, and the position lists what grade and step level it's hiring for. And in most cases, you'll be just a little bit above what you were before. And then once you're in that position, you'll be going stepwise up, but you're eligible to go an entire grade up after 1 year of being in that position. So this is if you're a federal government hire. You can also be a government worker as a contractor, and that's very common at USAID, especially. And so you're not paid by the government, you're paid by the company that contracts you, and then you work at the government. You still have a government ID, you still have a government email, all of that, but you're just not a direct government employee. And so if you're a contractor, you get a lot more leverage in how you negotiate your salary, because you're just working for that company at that point, not the government. And so it can vary depending on how you're hired within the government. So that's just the thing about salary. Okay, I'll stop. I think I've been talking a while.
I want to add here, because I get infuriated about the maybe that's too on the nose, but I get infuriated about about how opaque salary can be, and it's not in the government actually. Like, look up the GS levels, you can look at exactly what those salaries are. But because of that feeling I have, I will just share with you all that I make $103,000 and $625 on top of that per year base salary. That is a GS 13.1 in this locale, and you can look that up elsewhere. I started out as a GS 12. I made $86,000. The reason I point this out in particular, and why it is important to me, is in the postdoc, you're not going to make that much. Stanford, where I was, had a minimum salary, which was fantastic at 60. They're working and moving their way up to 70K. That in Palo Alto is not much. Actually, that's really like quite challenging if you have a family to live And I have a son. It wasn't, we were very advantaged. We were fine, but there are plenty of people I know who didn't do well in that. Some advice that folks gave me, and I was too stuck in the mentality of I got to go for this PI thing to pay attention to, was there is a financial cost. There is a financial cost to doing a postdoc after your PhD. And the differential, just to be explicit, is from the numbers with Stanford, is $40,000 a year. And that can be very important for folks in terms of family planning, establishing whatever, lifestyle goals they have, and a variety of other things. So I feel passionately about that and like to be explicit.
Thanks so much for that, Jesse. Since you mentioned lifestyle things, and that's related to the salary as well, can each of you just speak to kind of what your lifestyle is like now, maybe as compared to what it was in graduate school, or draw some comparisons, so we might have an idea of what does that look like, your not just your day-to-day work, but you're living as a person.
I go to Trader Joe's and I don't worry about what the bill is going to be at the end when I'm checking out. I love that feeling. Sorry, I'm being facetious. Sam, I feel like I should. Sam, you should.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. These past couple of years have sucked. Like, I don't know what to say. So it's also, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I loved Philly, actually, right? And I love Philly. I also love DC. There are similarities and differences, right? So, I mean, I think one of the things that I actually really like about Philly, and like had told other people that is different in DC a little bit, is Philly is like a real city. It has character. It has a personality, but it also still has, of course, arts, great restaurants, outside spaces, all of these kinds of different things, like groups that you can be a part of. So all of that exists down here too. I think something about DC that I feel like it does have changing administrations, right? There are new people coming in and out all the time. So I really love that. But then it's DC, so it's the nation's capital. So it's like fancy and weirdly clean in places, you know what I mean? So it's a little bit like, it is a city, sure, but not in the same way that like Philly is or Baltimore is, which is not that far away, right? I mean, I don't know. I used to be in a competitive karaoke league pre-pandemic, but that's clearly not very COVID safe. So that kind of went away. I think being in this position in the government in particular offers stability. So as a Fed, I'm in it. It's kind of hard to even get myself fired if I wanted to try, but I obviously don't, right? I want to do a good job. And so I think that is what really helps you get to the point, to Sachi's, comment. She knows she can just go to Trader Joe's and pay for things, right? And where your paycheck is coming, and where your health insurance is, and and it's also like just a W-2. I remember taxes as a grad student were complicated. They're not anymore. They just are. It's magic. You get a thing and then you fill out your taxes and then you're done. You're like, weird. That was easy. So I don't know. I mean, right now I stand at my standing desk in my living room all the time. So
yeah,
what I loved when Jessica.
You got it, Sach. Yeah, so quickly, work-life balance is much better for me than my postdoc or graduate school. Level of concern, it's a lot of teamwork. I love teamwork, and so I'm much less concerned about what I'm producing, and everything was on my shoulders as a postdoc, especially, and often as a grad student. That's not the case. It's a pandemic, right? I have a Peloton. That's my way of being social. I can afford that Peloton, not a problem. I have a 2-year-old, and Sam and such, I don't know if this is new to you, but we're having another one. So, and I'm not at all worried about that financially. I'm also not at all worried about that in terms of my time. I will be able to be the parent I want to be in this. I was very concerned about being an assistant professor and being the father I wanted to be. Could have happened, maybe, but I was more concerned there. I'm not at all concerned here.
Thank you. Anything else? And congratulations.
It feels like we could talk about this for like 2 more or 3 more hours, but we actually have another talk coming up. So I think we're going to have to cut us off.
Yeah,
go ahead, Rista.
I was just going to say I can wrap everyone up by just saying thank you so much for all of your time. Also love all the comparisons between DC and Philly, having also lived in both cities. And maybe in just maybe 1 minute, each person could mention one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, or they wish they knew when they were in graduate school. And then I think we'll probably close out for the next talk. Maybe Sachi, do you want to start again, or I won't put anyone on the spot if you want to think?
Sure. I mean, I think I had done my research pretty well about what I was expecting, but it was still a shock to go into a completely different field where I had to start from scratch. And just, I think what I didn't know in grad school is that you could reinvent yourself, and that what you do in grad school doesn't have to define the rest of your career. And I still have that feeling of like, I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. And so I think that coming into this field has allowed that feeling to remain open for me, I think, for the rest of my life. Like I can just keep reinventing what I want to do. If I want to leave this work and move somewhere completely different, that's not at all a challenge. I feel like the world is open to me. So I think I didn't feel that I had like picked my career path and I was going on a linear trajectory, and now it's like all confusing and a big mess, and it's great.
Thanks. Jesse?
Yeah, I'll add that enjoy grad school for those of you who are in it. Enjoy the postdoc and the science if you are enjoying it. For those of you who are in it, you'll get somewhere, it'll be great. Doesn't have to be that. But there's a lot of fun for some of us in the exploration and pushing the frontiers. I do miss that. It's really exciting to be the only one who knows something, and keeping that perspective while also being like, and I'm leaving, is like totally fine. It's okay. And so then the other thing I had to say was, I also want to be explicit, because I wasn't, about how many hours I work in a week. I work about 45 hours a week. And that's pretty regular. Sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes it's less. And while there is a little more rigidity to the schedule, I have a relationship with my supervisor where it's flexible. And if I work a couple hours on a time otherwise, then I just go and pick up my son early on another day. It's not at all like the big picture, again, just saying, but admitting I'm an anxious person at times, right? The big picture is I am not always thinking about my research project or my work in this case, which I was when I was a postdoc or a grad student. How am I going to get this done? What do I have to do next? Made it really hard to be present for all the other things in my life, except when Sachi and Sam and I were out having a good time in Philly. So that's what I love about this. It's a big change for me.
Thanks. And Sam?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's been a while for me, and kind of to Sachi's point, like I had been looking into options at the time too. There are benefits about having a PhD. So like I had mentioned before that I kind of finished my prelim and was like, I guess I don't want this, but I felt like I was over the hump. I felt like it was like I had hit Thursday of the week and I was like, let's just finish out the week kind of thing. But you don't have to. And there really are lots of different ways that you can be involved in science, in policy, in all of in being an influencer without forcing yourself to finish the PhD And it is not less than, it is doing what is right for you, for your interest, for your professional development, and for your personal development. Being in graduate school is gonna make an impact on your life for chunks of time. And you can have an impact on your life in other ways too. So like, I guess Sachi kind of alluded to this too. It's just an appreciation for how flexible things really are. There is no one path for anything, not academia, not government, not industry, not any of it. And so if you want to, it is just your path, right? And if you want it to be meandering, meander away, go forth. It's not wrong. No one can tell you it's wrong because it's what's right for you. And as long as you do something, anything, don't just like sit and do nothing, you'll be getting experiences. You'll be learning more about yourself. You'll be meeting other people and expanding your networks, and you can use all of that, even if it takes you another 6 years to actually get to a place where you go, oh, okay, this. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think next we're moving to our seminar talk, which is Ranjane Kurtane, who's the Director of Research at Helio Campus. And they'll be talking about academia from a different perspective, researching trends in higher education. Heather, if you have anything else to add, otherwise I'll just say thank you so much, Jesse, who have popped off, Sam and Sachi.
Yeah, just thank you to our panelists, and I look forward to maybe next year you'll come back in person and do this again. And best of luck.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Good luck, everyone. So happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.